Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to do a quiz review today. Remember, for the reviews, you don't have to watch the entire video here, so you can kind of scroll through the notes or fast forward through the video as needed. So if there's a problem that you need to see, make sure you watch the video for that problem. If it's a problem that you feel like you're comfortable with, go try it on the practice problems and see how you do. If you are getting it wrong, maybe you need to come back and watch this video and make sure that you've got these problems nailed down. All right, so we're going to start off with one of our basic skills that we've been learning throughout the week, which is just writing equations using a description or a graph. So I might verbally tell you about a parabola and ask you to write its equation, or I might show you a graph and ask you to write its equation. You should be prepared for both situations. Okay, so for instance, in this first one, they give us some clues here. It says it opens downward, it's stretched by a factor of 4, tells us where the vertex is. And our job is to write an equation that looks like this that represents that parabola. All right, so I'm going to start my equation here, and I'm just going to work my way from left to right here. So I notice the first thing I need to figure out here is what is the a value. So if I read the first clue here, it says that it opens downward. And if it opens downward, that means I'm going to have a negative, right? The negative is what flips the parabola down. If there is no negative there, it will open upwards. Okay. The next thing that it tells me is that it's been vertically stretched by a factor of 4. So that means the actual a value is going to be a 4 instead of a 1, right? So if there was no stretch, it would be a 1. If there is any kind of stretch, it'll be a different number. So if it's a number above 1, right, it'll be a stretch. If it's a number below 1 or in between 0 and 1, it'll be a compression. Okay, so make sure you pay attention to the difference in those words. All right, so then I'm going to start working inside the parentheses here. So we have x minus h. Now remember, h controls the horizontal movement of the parabola. Okay, so we know that a vertex, if it hasn't been moved at all, if the parabola hasn't been shifted up or down or left or right, then the vertex would be located at 0, 0. But this one is located at 8, 3, right? So if I'm thinking about a graph, it would normally start here at 0, 0, but this one is at 8, which is going to be over here off the graph to the right. So I know that it's been shifted to the right 8 units. And to shift to the right, I need an x minus 8. Okay, so that gives me my h value. Don't forget to put your square on the parentheses because it is a parabola. And then the k value is our up and down movement. And we can get that from the y value inside of the vertex, right? So if it was located at 8, 3, that means it went to the right 8 and then up 3. That's where the vertex is located because that's how the parabola has shifted, all right? So I've got a plus 3 on the end. And this becomes my equation. Right, so it's a lot like fill in the blank, right? Your 3 blanks being the a, h, and k values, which you need to extract from the clues that they give you. All right, let's do it one more time, but this time we're just going to do it straight from a graph. All right, so we start off, I always start off by writing this graphing form, and then I know that I need to find these 3 things, a, h, and k. All right, so I'm going to start with a, and they give me a clue about a here in the instructions, right? It says a can be 1 or negative 1. It's going to be one of those 2 numbers. So to figure out which one of the 2 it's going to be, I look at my parabola and I notice that it opens downwards. So if a parabola opens downwards, it's going to be a negative 1. Okay? If it were opening upwards, right? So if it went off like this, it would be a positive 1. So I'm going to start writing my equation here. So I've got y equals, and I'm going to put my negative 1 out front. And then I'm looking at my h value again, which is the horizontal shifting, right? So left or right. So normally, if it wasn't shifted at all, the vertex would be here. But it's over here, right? So that means it moved to the right 1. Right? So to move right 1, I need an x minus 1. And then it moved up 2. So that means the k value, which controls our vertical shift, is going to be plus 2. And that's it. That's my equation. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's look at solving equations. Well, solving equations is never going to go away. We're always going to be solving equations in Algebra 2. It's one of the cool things that we do in this class. All right. So and there's all kinds of different equations that we need to be prepared for. All right, so this first one is an example of the zero product property. All right, so it's a situation where I have two factors that are being multiplied by each other to get zero. And the idea is that if you multiply any two things together and get a zero, that means one of them has to be a zero. So first I'm going to say, well, let's let x plus 7 equal 0. Right? And then I'll solve this little mini equation just like this. Right? So I'll subtract 7 from both sides, and the 7's will cancel, and we'll say x equals negative 7. Right? So if I took that negative 7 and I plugged it in up here, I'd get negative 7 plus 7, which gives me a 0. Right? That's what I wanted. All right, so then the other scenario is if x plus 4 is the 0. Okay, so I'm going to say x plus 4 equals 0. And I do the same thing. I'm going to solve this thing. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides of the equation. So those cancel. And we get x equals negative 4. All right, so if I took that negative 4 and plugged it back in up here, I'd get negative 4 plus 4, which gives me 0. And that's what I wanted. All right, so I have two different solutions that I need to state. Now, if you're on MyOpenMath, right, it's going to say x equals, and there's going to be a blank box here, right? You want to list both of these solutions. So I'm going to say negative 7, comma, negative 4. So make sure you separate the solutions with a comma when you enter that in. Now, this does not represent a point. It's not a coordinate, so you do not need to put parentheses on it. All right. Let's look at the next one. This one says quadratic formula or factoring. So on the quiz, you're going to have a problem. It's going to give you an option to use the quadratic formula, or you could use factoring. I'm going to demonstrate factoring because it's going to be a lot quicker. I encourage you to use factoring. It's a lot easier than the quadratic formula, but if you want to, you can still use the quadratic formula to solve this problem. Okay, so here we go. So factoring. All right, remember factoring requires a box and a diamond. There's my box. There's my diamond. So I'm going to take the x squared. It goes in the upper left-hand box. The negative 6 goes in the bottom right-hand box. And then I multiply those to get the top of my diamond. And the middle term, the positive x. So I'll just put a 1x down here in the bottom of my diamond. So what I'm looking for are two numbers that multiply to give me a negative 6 and add to give me a positive 1. Those two numbers, and like I said, you might have to think about it a little bit. You might not get them as quickly as I do, and that's okay. So you might have to trial and error a little bit to figure out what they are. So the correct numbers here are going to be 3 and negative 2. So let's test that out real quick. 3 times negative 2 gives me the negative 6, and 3 plus negative 2 gives me a positive 1. So this works. So I'm going to fill in my other two boxes. Right, so just like that. And then I'm going to work on my outside dimensions. Right, so we get x, and then x times negative 2 gives me the negative 2x, and x times 3 gives me the 3x, and 3 times negative 2 gives me the negative 6. So these are my factors. So I'm going to rewrite my equation. So I have x plus 3 times x minus 2 equals 0. And now this equation looks exactly like what we did over here for zero product property. So I can just use what I did from zero product property to find my solutions. So we're going to say x plus 3 equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. If you solve this, right, just like we did over here, you're going to get x equals negative 3, and over here you'll get x equals 2. So in MyOpenMath, I would make sure that I enter in my two solutions, negative 3, comma 2. All right, last equation that I'm going to talk about in the review here today is a solving for a variable. You'll notice in this problem there are two different variables, x and y. It says solve for y, which is code word for get y by itself. Okay, so everything that's not a y, I'm going to move it over here with the 24. All right, so just draw a line and start moving things around. I'm going to start with the 16x. So minus 16x on both sides. All right, so to move something from one side to the other, you have to do the opposite. So this is a positive 16x, which is why I'm subtracting 16x. And then whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other side. Okay, so on this side, the 16x's will cancel, and all that's left is a 4y. Over here, I have to subtract these two things, but they are not like terms. So the best that I can do is just write 24 minus 16x. Right? Now the only thing left over here with the y is this 4, and since it's being multiplied by 4, I need to divide by 4, which means I have to divide everything over here by 4 as well. Right? Whatever I do on one side, I have to do on the other. So I'm going to divide the 24 by 4 and the 16x by 4. 4's cancel here and become a 1. So now all I have left is 1y. And then I go through and I divide. 24 divided by 4 is 6. And negative 16 divided by 4 is negative 4x. There's my final equation. All right, this one is kind of weird for students because you don't end up with a number like we did in the first two problems. That's because we have two variables. So instead of getting a number, we're going to get an expression that represents this variable. But this is what you would enter into MyOpenMath. All right, last problem here that I'm going to review is completing the square. I've been harping on you guys all week about this and saying, hey, you need to make sure that you know how to do completing the square. So this is the last example that I will do for you in hopes that you are actually ready for it on the quiz. All right, so completing the square, right, we start by taking the x squared term and putting that in the upper left-hand box. The 2x in the middle gets cut in half. All right, so if I take 2x and I cut it in half, you get 1x and 1x. Right? And then I'm going to start working on my outside dimensions. So to get an x squared, I will need an x and an x as the dimensions there, right? Because x times x is x squared. And then down here, x times 1 gives me 1x, and over here, x times 1 gives me 1x. To complete my square, right, 1 times 1 gives me 1. So I end up with a 1 in the bottom right-hand corner. Now I start rewriting my equation. So I have y equals x plus 1 times x plus 1. And those come from the dimensions of the big box, right? So the height is x plus 1. The width is also x plus 1. So I have height times width. And since those are the same thing, I can condense this a little bit as x plus 1 squared. The problem is, with this box, I end up getting a 1 on the end, and I need a negative 3. So to go from 1 back down to negative 3, I would have to subtract 4. Right? 1 minus 4 gives me the negative 3 that I need. So this is like a correction on the end, right? I ended up with a 1, but I needed a negative 3, so the minus 4 corrects it. Now, this is in graphing form, right? It looks like this. This is our graphing form. And I have an equation that looks like that. And something that you should note is that this represents the same parabola as this. So I can use it to find the vertex of my parabola. So remember, for the vertex, we look at the h value first. Right? H value tells us where the x coordinate is going to be. Since this was a plus 1, it tells me that the vertex shifted to the left 1 unit. So I'll have minus 1, comma, and then minus 4 here on the end tells me that the vertex has been shifted down 4 units. So this will be at negative 1, negative 4. And make sure you enter this into MyOpenMath as a coordinate. So you'll need your x and y coordinates separated with a comma, complete with a set of parentheses. All right, guys, that's it for our quiz review today. Good luck on your quiz tomorrow, and I hope you do well.